Yes, thanks for staying with us. Going to have a chat now. There was a horrid horse racing accident a year and a half ago involving our next guest. We don't want to talk about that, but the process after that happens, Poppy. Now, Libby Hopwood, of course, has joined us on the panel. Lib, you just recently went through another neuropsychology assessment. Can you give us a rough idea on how they do that?
Well, we actually have to sit a concussion test every year, which gives us our baseline. So if we hit our head, we need to pass that concussion test to prove that we've reached our baseline. And I couldn't reach my old baseline, so they sent me to the neuropsychology test, which is essentially the concussion test on steroids. So it's the first test I sat was 6 hours of quite intensive testing. And the one that I just sat was 3 hours because they'd already found the areas that I was lacking in, and we just went in and addressed those and found that we weren't improving.
That's interesting, though. I didn't realise that. So they set a benchmark prior to any accident possibly happening.
Yes.
I'm not sure that happens in, for instance...
Sport.
No, I'm not sure that happens in AFL football, but it seems strange that given the protection of the head and the fact that they want to protect the player prior to him coming back on the ground, that they wouldn't have this benchmark in place. I think that's something that's probably worth exploring.
I think they might already, because I'm fairly sure our test came from AFL.
Okay, so I hadn't heard of that, so that's interesting.
I'm not sure whether they had the benchmark or whether, well, they must have. If they ask the players to sit the test after they have a head injuries, then they must have a benchmark. But
to work
I'm fairly certain that this test actually came from AFL.
Okay, and you needed, obviously, to reach a certain level for you to be considered to ride in a race again?
Yes, the way that it stands at the moment is when you hit your head, you need to pass your old bench line. So you're not trying to pass anyone else's, you sit yours and you're just trying to reach that. But I couldn't quite reach that because I wasn't quite concussed. I had some more significant damage. So my brain has changed and I couldn't reach my old benchmark.
So what does that mean?
Yeah,
what does
so
that mean?
second test, so you've had one, haven't you? Sorry, Pop.
Yes.
This is the second one. So, yeah, what does that mean, second test?
Well, with the second neuropsych test is we're sort of getting down to the pointy end now because they say it takes 2 years for brain injuries to heal. We're at a year and a half now. I sat one 6 months ago, and when I failed that, it was devastating because I expected to pass it, but there was always the hope that I'll just sit one in 6 months and I'll pass it then, who cares? But going into it this time, I felt in myself that I hadn't changed much. I felt there's still the same sort of problems that I have had from 6 months ago. So
which are?
I have problems with attention splitting. So if I'm not fully focused on something, for instance, I backed my car into the mailbox that's been there for the 6 years that I've owned the house. Because I was focusing on the dog. So it's just little things like that. And that is why they won't allow me to race ride, because they're concerned that in a race field, I won't be able to take in all the relevant information from 12 horses running around me and respond appropriately.
You're doing track work at the moment, though, aren't you?
I am. I'm doing track work. And I think they've allowed track work because there's only 1 or 2 horses in track work, and maybe even 3, but it's structured. The horses go in their own lines, notwithstanding horses shying or doing things that horses do, but that's just natural anyway. So it's more of a structured environment. I don't need to think on my feet.
If there was a race at Murray Bridge, hypothetically, and there were 4 horses running in it, I'm assuming that could occur.
Yeah, sure.
What would stop you from riding in that race? I mean, I understand 8 horses, there's a lot happening, but if you bring the number down to 3 or 4 horses and you're doing track work, I understand what you've said, that do you think you could handle a 4-horse race?
I feel like I can handle a race field, but it's not what
So you would think, though, that 4, would you be comfortable?
I might be able to argue that with the stewards, but there's also the concern as well that if I fall off again, I'm going to be at a greater risk because your brain your brain starts at here. I'm already at this level of damage. If I hit my head again, I'm not starting from a basic level of damage. So there's always the fear and that could always happen in track work. We've had some serious falls in track work. A friend of mine, Ellie Brooks, was in a coma a few years ago from a track work fall, but the likelihood of it is less. And
I understand the industry too, having those sorts of precautions in place. They've got an obligation because it's not only the safety of Libby, but it's all about protecting the other race riders and horses around her.
That's exactly right. It was all right for me to shrug off the risk to me because this is my life. It's who I'm affecting. I'm sure I can find somebody to look after my dog if something happens, but
what sort of dog is it?
He's a schnoodle. Do you want
No, not me. You interested in a schnoodle?
I've got a German Shepherd, mate, I'm right.
I don't want to put any other riders at risk. So if I'm not 100% in the fact that I can't assure that I can look after the other riders and know exactly what they're doing like I used to, then I won't put other riders at risk.
So, Lib, I guess this means the riding career of Libby Hopwood is gone, which I know would be devastating for you. But is it something that you were prepared for prior to that test? You seem as though when you said you hadn't improved, you're almost readying yourself for the inevitable.
I was, and because I sat 4 or 5 concussion tests, I failed every single one of them. I failed my first neuropsych test. There are all these benchmarks that I had to meet, and I was so self-assuredly confident that I would meet those. I would go into them completely ready to get back to track work, and then I'd have somebody tell me, no, sorry, you can't do it. And it was just devastating every single time, especially the last neuropsych test. I thought after the last neuropsych, I sort of went through a stage where I don't have to be skinny anymore, and just started eating everything. And also I took a step back and I thought, if it happens, it happens. But if it doesn't, I'm going to stop pushing myself for that now, because it's just breaking my heart when I don't get there.
Yeah, it's better like they don't give it to you on consistently, Lib, because you're very consistent with it. We need to get to a break. Stay with us. Still plenty to talk about. We will get Libby back again at one stage and find out how that's progressing. Time to take a break. Back with more in a moment.